Welcome to Greenable Woodbridge. I'm your host, Carolyn Ehrlich, and today's guest is George Vallone, who is the president and founder of Hoboken Brownstone, which is actually in Jersey City. He's the past president of the NJBIA. NJBA, right. Yep. And he also is a founder of the NJBA's mixed-use developers.
That's right.
And most importantly, I think, I might not make you the most money, but you also teach. You teach at Rutgers.
I do.
And you teach people like me. Back when I first started this with Mayor McCormick, and we started talking about redevelopment and cleaning up brownfields, and I was still on a learning curve. I must admit, of course, we're always still on a learning curve,
Never ends.
right? But I was at the very bottom of the learning curve, right? And I said to people, "Who should I talk to?" And to a person, they all said, "Call George Vallone." And
he doesn't charge much.
Right. You gave me so much time and shared your wisdom, and I will never forget how absolutely you got us, the town, on. And back then, our concern was how many brownfields we had, and how do we develop them, and how do we clean them up. And your lessons are so good that now when people come to us looking for a brownfield to build on, we got done.
There's none left.
There's one left. That's it.
That's pretty good.
That is.
That's awesome.
They're really exciting, except for some of the little gas stations that still have their tanks in them, which DEP considers a brownfield, but yeah.
Those will be gone soon.
Right.
Eventually.
So, so you and I shared a panel at New Jersey Future.
We did.
On green redevelopment and cleaning up brownfields, and we had so much fun together.
We did.
I said, "You got to come on my TV show," because I knew you would make a great show.
Thank you. Appreciate the invitation.
So talk about your company, how far back you go, and a little bit of your history.
You want me to let everybody know how old I am, huh?
Oh, it's okay. You look great, so it's all right.
Well, I actually met my partner in '72 when we were freshmen at Gettysburg College.
Wow.
So I've known him since 1972. We decided 1 year out of school, which was '77, when we were both going to grad school, him for a master's degree in design and construction management, me for finance, that we were going to start a real estate development business together. We started looking where we were going to start. Simultaneously, my best friend from high school, Mike Brady, his father, Pat Brady, was a retired real estate developer, and he always wanted Mike to be a developer. Mike wanted to be a track coach. So Mike's like, "Go talk to my dad. He wants to talk to somebody about real estate development. He wants to mentor somebody." So I was like, "No problem." So we started going to see him like once a week. And we would sit down with him like on a Wednesday night. And every Saturday and every Sunday, all through '78, '79, and early 1980, we would go on road trips on Saturday and Sunday. We would pick a place, go there, study it, meet local real estate brokers, learn the market, see what's going on. And then that following Wednesday night, we'd sit down with Mr. Brady, and we'd talk about what we found and what we saw. And Mr. Brady was great. He never gave you answers. He only asked you questions. And in the process of trying to figure out the answers, we were learning the development business.
That's terrific.
So it was October of 1980. We found 210 3rd Street in Hoboken, a little 4-story brownstone, and it was for sale for $20,000. And that next Wednesday night, Mr. Brady, we all came to the conclusion that this is the place to start the business. And so we bought it.
So I'm sure a lot of my viewers are saying, "Why is she wearing her redevelopment hat? This is the Greenable show. What is she talking about?" And those people who know me know I like to wear all my hats at one time.
You have a lot of hats.
Yep, and I love when they all come together. And what you do with the redevelopment is actually bringing sustainability into people's lives. And we're about to start building our transit villages up, And you've been doing this now for decades.
Yep.
You were the first one to get the idea, if I build by the train stations in Jersey City and the path in Hoboken, it's where people are going to want to live.
Yep.
And I read a little thing about you on the website, and it said, back then you were building for yuppies,
yep.
and now you're building for millennials. But it's the same.
It's the same
concept,
same market.
Same market.
Young people that want to be in urban areas. They want to be in walkable. They want to be able to get to the fun places, convenience places. They want to be able to get to work, either by walking there or getting to a train or a bus that'll get them there. And that's the market right now.
Right.
And now the interesting thing is, though, that the millennials, which make up about 72 million people of the United States population, slightly more than the baby boomers.
Mm-hmm.
My generation, it was 68 million baby boomers. So there's 68 million boomers, 72 million millennials. That's 150 million people, just under half the population of the entire country. And they're both moving in the same direction. They're both going urban, walkable, transit-oriented. So it's a mega trend. There's no question about it. It's a mega trend.
And it is sustainable living.
I think redevelopment is the ultimate in sustainable living, especially, and then when you put a brownfield overlay on top of that, where we're taking industrial properties whose industrial use is gone for a variety of reasons. The industry is either shut down or relocated. And now we're cleaning up the earth, we're cleaning the ground, we're getting rid of contaminated buildings, we're cleaning contaminated groundwater, and we're bringing in quality housing, retail. Mixed use is basically residential and retail.
Right.
Sometimes a little bit of office, but it's basically residential with a retail component on the ground floor. Parking is usually included, although I'm designing parking right now so that in another decade or so it can be repurposed into something else, because I don't think people are going to own cars.
Brilliant.
Yeah. When you're talking about, I mean, the early stage of it is the Lyft and Uber,
right,
and the car on demand. A little while ago, it was the Zip cars, where you didn't have a driver.
Right.
As it evolves from cars that have drivers to cars that you can timeshare and drive yourself, the next thing is going to be driverless cars.
I can't wait.
Nope, me too. Nobody's going to own a car.
Right.
So these buildings that are built with parking garages, the developers that are thinking about these buildings ought to be thinking about the next use of the parking levels, because it's not going to be for parking cars.
And those of us in government have to change all of our zoning laws and parking regs.
Yeah. Well, we were just successful at convincing the Jersey City Planning Department to reduce the parking requirement in the redevelopment area where we're working in downtown Jersey City by 50%. It used to be 1-to-1. You had to build one parking
spot. We're asking for.
You have 1-to-1 now.
Right.
We just changed it. Now it's 0.5-to-1. Option of the developer.
Wow.
So if you want to do 1-to-1, you can still do 1-to-1. But if you think like me that this parking space is not the best use of space, you can go all the way down to 0.5.
Right.
Half a space to a unit.
So in 1950, when they built up most of Woodbridge, the modern suburb, which was built all around the cars, we are now working on development that will make cars obsolete. I love it. And there's nothing better for our environment than to get all the cars off the road.
No, it's so true.
That is fantastic.
It's so true. I'm a big history buff, so I remember when, before the dawn of automobiles, when horses were the power and people had horse-drawn carriages and trucks that were even drawn by horses, people thought cities were going to end up becoming buried under a mountain of horse manure, and that there was no way the cities were going to be able to survive under this ever-increasing load of horse manure. And obviously, when the automobiles came in, literally within a decade, horses were gone, no more horse manure problem.
Right.
So it's the evolution of technology.
That's true. That's absolutely true. Deliveries will be by drones.
Is that amazing that they're talking about that now? My son bought a drone. We're cleaning up a 7-acre site in downtown Jersey City. And once a week he flies it with his drone, and he looks straight down on the property, takes pictures of it.
Right.
So we're going to have a nice progress report, photo journal of the whole thing, which is going to be cool.
So you're working on some exciting projects right now. You want to talk about a couple of them?
Yeah, well, we have 5 projects in Jersey City. We just finished one in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. All basically the same thing, repurposing industrial properties into mixed-use development. In Jersey City, we have one project which is on an old trucking and warehousing terminal. It's 3 city blocks. We're building 1,181 units in 5 towers. We're creating a 2-acre park right in the middle of the whole development.
Wow.
The city's vacating a street so we can connect the 2 1-acre blocks and make it a 2-acre park. And there's going to be, we're putting in green infrastructure techniques, which I know you wanted to talk about a little bit today.
Yes.
And it's going to be awesome. There's going to be views of Manhattan. We're 3 blocks from where the last light rail station stop to be built will be eventually located. We're trying to figure out a way to fund that right now. I was at a conference last week that was put on by the Environmental Bankers Association, and I did a panel discussion on infrastructure financing. So I happen to have a lot of current information on that whole game. And it's interesting because the general counsel for Conrail was on my panel.
Oh, we need him. We got Conrail stuff going on.
He's a great guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, his name's John, I can't remember his last name right now, but I'll get it for you. And he was talking about the High Line. And the High Line in Manhattan is about 1.5 miles. It was an elevated railroad. And back in the last days of the Giuliani administration, by 1 vote, they decided not to take it down. They were about to demolish the whole thing and take it down. And this community group who had sort of discovered it and wanted to renovate it and make it into a linear park was lobbying the heck out of their council people, and literally by 1 vote they decided not to demolish it. Then Bloomberg came in, he got it like that, and he was the one that put a lot of money behind it. There was a $160 million project. The city of New York put up $100 million. Private interest donated $60 million. And the sad thing is, the way they didn't do the way I would have done it. Because the way I would have done it was I would have negotiated with all the property owners along the High Line and gotten them to pay for it. Instead, they thought they had to get the buy-in of all the property owners, and they gave them these massive density upzonings. They upzoned the properties almost 10 times what the existing zoning was, so all the property owners along the way would go along with it. Well, every one of those property owners took all that value and put it right in their pocket.
Right.
And it was about $5 billion of value that was created by that upzoning. So if the city had come up with a value recapture model, where even if they had just taken 0.5% of that $5 billion, they would have got the $100 million like that, and it wouldn't have cost the city a nickel. So the game in infrastructure financing is all about value recapture. Infrastructure creates value because it creates accessibility.
Right.
Accessibility is value. And if you can take that value and figure out how to capture some of it and recycle it back into the cost of infrastructure, now you've got a sustainable model. Because infrastructure is such a long-term investment.
Yes.
And I don't mean to say anything about politicians in general, but in general, politicians think short-term.
Right.
They want to know, what can I do between now and when I'm going to get reelected so everybody will be happy and reelect me?
Right.
Well, sometimes you got to spend a lot of money and build large, long-term projects that the value may not come back for a long time. So it's difficult, and the other problem in New Jersey is that transportation planning is done at the regional or the state level, and yet land use is done at the municipal level.
Right.
So there's a disconnect between where land use policy is being made, where zoning approvals are being granted, and transportation planners, and how can they make these investments and somehow connect those to these local real estate approvals. Big disconnect there. So I studied, there's about 8 different models that you can use to recapture value from infrastructure, value created by infrastructure, in order to finance infrastructure. And they're interesting. It's interesting, but there's got to be some policy planning to bring that disconnect of local real estate planning and regional transportation planning and bring them together and connect them. That's sort of the missing link right now.
Right. So we're talking about moving a an exit ramp off of Route 9
Okay.
from where it is now, where it causes a major bottleneck, through the Hess property, which is about to be redeveloped.
Okay.
And everybody's got to pay toward it, the state, the county, the town. So in your model, what you're saying is the developer who gets that property should be
in on that.
And investing in it.
Yep.
Because they're going to get the benefit of it.
That's right. And there's different models that you can do that with. You know, there's joint development models. There's a model called a transportation count, like if you can figure out how many people are going to use that infrastructure improvement and what the cost savings is for each one of those. You have to somehow correlate the value of the infrastructure to the property owner.
Right.
And then figure out, okay, there's this value increase, and then how much of that can we capture and recycle back into the infrastructure financing? That's really the trick of the whole thing. Yeah. China has a great model. It's called the Rail and Property Corporation. Simple name, but right to the point. And what they did is they set up a private corporation. The government of China owns 25% of it, but it's 75% owned by private property interests. And they licensed this corporation to build rail from Hong Kong straight out into the countryside. And this corporation has the ability to negotiate the land development along the right-of-way. They can negotiate with individual towns that want a station stop. And by doing this, they're able to capture the value. So they pay the property owners around where there's going to be a rail station. They'll pay them what the value is without the rail station. And then they come in and build large developments, mixed-use developments around these station stops. They sell those. They don't build them. They approve them, and then they sell them to developers. And then when they sell them to developers, they get all this income for this high-value, high-density development sites, and they use that to pay for the rail.
That is
so
great.
They are now moving 5 million people a day. They have a 99% on-time schedule, and the government in 2015 made close to $500 million. That was their 25% share.
And they got mass transit. Can you imagine if we do something like that along the Parkway or the Turnpike, so that you can get there by rail without having to ever get in your car once again?
You have the right-of-way. Well, once autonomous vehicles come into effect, it's going to be the same thing. You're just going to see lines of vehicles going down the highways with, you know, like they can be 10 inches apart because they're all going to be operating as one unit, almost like a train, but a bunch of cars that are just operating together.
Yeah.
So it's coming.
While you're doing whatever it is you want to do.
Yeah, you'll be doing your homework, listening to music. Yeah. It's a great
not
thing.
like we're not doing it now.
That's true. We're not supposed to be.
Right. That is fascinating.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff.
Yes.
Interesting stuff. So I was telling John at Conrail, I said, John, why don't we get together and let's not make the same mistake again. Oh, the other thing they did with the High Line, after the whole thing was built and all the property owners along the right-of-way had gotten this massive upzoning, they formed a nonprofit corporation. And the nonprofit, which was a lot of these community activists that had originally envisioned this thing, now run the nonprofit. And they came up with a budget, $20 million a year, to operate the High Line. So it's current operations and maintenance plus future replacement. They had no way to fund that. So they proposed a special improvement district where all the people along the right-of-way would have a little surcharge on their property taxes to help fund this operating cost to maintain this wonderful infrastructure improvement. Everybody voted it down.
Wow.
It was too late. It was already there.
Right.
There was no quid pro quo. They got the quid without any pro quo.
Right.
And so it was all done backwards. And I said to John, John, listen, this is no slight on you or Conrail, because I know there were community activists and property owners and politicians. It was this huge, planning by committee, which usually does not work.
Right.
But I said, in the future, if you'd like to form a venture where I would love to team up with Conrail, and let's start looking at all these abandoned railroad rights-of-ways you have across the country. Let's pick the communities where they could make a difference, and let's figure out how to work with that community to use those rights-of-ways as infrastructure improvements, create value, and then recapture the value and cover the cost of it for you. So he said, that's a good idea. He said, so we're going to get together for lunch soon up in Jersey City and talk about that.
Invite me to that lunch.
Oh, that would be great. That would be great.
That sounds terrific.
Yeah, so some fun stuff on the horizon.
Yeah, the future looks good.
We're looking forward to that. It does look good.
Yeah.
So back to Jersey City. So we've got this large 3-block project. We're also now doing a redevelopment of the Van Leer Chocolate Factory, which is a 7-acre site. It used to be a chocolate factory, as the name goes. The Van Leer family came over here in 1938 and started making chocolate there. A lot of people that grew up in Jersey City remember the smell of the chocolate.
Sure. Oh my gosh.
Buying Van Leer chocolate. And so we're doing it, but unfortunately it has almost a $10 million arsenic contamination problem, because before it was a chocolate factory, it was a pesticide manufacturing plant.
I'm glad to hear for a minute there I thought the arsenic was in the chocolate.
No, special flavor. No, it was a pesticide plant, and they brought in white cake arsenic on rail siding, and they had a siding that went right into the warehouse. They must have spilled it all over the place as they were unloading it, because right along the rail siding are some of the highest levels in arsenic in the whole state of New Jersey. Yeah, it's nasty stuff. So we are literally excavating $5 million worth of soil out of there, treating it first, and then shipping it. And then we're going to cap the site. It'll be a completely capped site. Mm-hmm. And it'll be about 625 units when we're all done.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's good. That's finally underway.
And talk about, as you design and build these buildings, how you keep the buildings themselves sustainable with green design, green plans.
Yep. Well, there's 3 ways to make a building green. And in order of importance, the first is the building enclosure. If you build a building enclosure that is thermally efficient, you're going to cut down the loss of energy. Because what happens is we build buildings and they leak energy. It's kind of weird, because every kitchen and every bathroom and like dryers have to have a vent.
Right.
They all have vents. So we're paying money to condition the space, heat it in the winter, cool it in the summer, and at the same time we're sucking that thermal energy and shooting it up through the roof into the atmosphere.
Right.
And it's also leaking through the enclosure of the building. It leaks through windows, it leaks through doors. Sometimes the enclosure itself isn't super efficient. So building a super tight, thermally efficient building envelope is really the first step.
Right.
And that can be done with insulation. It can be done with materials. There's a material called autoclaved aerated concrete, which is highly energy efficient. We've been involved with that since 12 years now. We're now the Mid-Atlantic rep for the only factory in the country, which is down in Florida. We came very close to building a factory in New Jersey back in 2007. Had commitments for financing, and then the recession hit, and everybody freaked out over investing in anything.
Right.
So the money people went away, and so we went down to the Florida folks and said, look, we'd like to sell this product in the Mid-Atlantic market. And they're like, great, we don't have anybody up there. So we are now their Mid-Atlantic rep for autoclaved aerated concrete. Highly energy efficient product, lightweight. You can go freestanding up to 6 floors, and then above that you need a structural frame, and you use it for your enclosure. It's fire resistant, sound resistant, blast resistant.
Sound
thermally
resistant is important by the train.
Super important, super important. So the enclosure is really number one. If you build a super efficient enclosure, you can cut your energy demand by 60%. So then the second thing is energy recovery ventilation. So for example, all these vents that are shooting thermal energy through the roof, there are ERVs, energy recovery ventilators, that capture the thermal energy and recycle it back into the home, so that only the waste air is going out into the atmosphere, not the thermal energy. That'll knock off another 20-25% of your energy demand. So now you're up to about 80-85%. The last 15%, alternative energy, solar, wind, geothermal, and because you've reduced the demand so significantly, the amount of the alternative energy systems and the cost of those systems is very low, because you don't need that much.
Wow.
So that's really the way to do it. We call it the tripod of energy efficiency. It's the enclosure, energy recovery ventilation, and then alternative energy as the last and smallest component. But you can build net zero energy buildings by doing this system.
That was fantastic. How much does it add to the cost of construction?
It adds, obviously it depends on the building, what kind of building you're building, but it does add to the cost of the building. It could be anywhere from 5%, it could be 30%, it could be double. It depends on what kind of building and how extensively you want to deploy these different technologies.
Right.
So the issue isn't so much first cost, the issue is cost recovery, life cycle cost.
Right.
So over how many years does it take of the reduced energy savings and also reduced water savings to pay back the additional investment.
Right.
So that's really the key. The key is the payback period. Most people are okay with payback periods up to 5 to 10 years. If it goes much beyond 10 years, they start to say, I don't know if it's worth it.
Yeah, right.
So that's one problem. Another problem is the disconnect between the builder and the end user.
Right. I was just thinking that.
If the builder spends a ton of money and then has to sell it for a higher price, the user gets all the savings. So how do you reconnect the savings, which amortizes the extra cost over time, with the guy who has the first cost? That's another problem. So if you're doing rental housing, for example, offices, apartments, retail, where you're going to be the owner-operator for the duration, not a big problem. You recover your own savings, you get your own payback. But if you're a merchant builder, somebody who builds a product and then sells it, or a condo builder or a home builder who sells the homes, difficult situation to reconnect the savings to the first price, to the first cost.
Wow. So we have about 2 more minutes left.
You're kidding.
I told you.
You said this was going to go fast. I didn't know it was going to go that fast.
Yep. So you pick your topic.
Pick my topic. Well, I'll tell you, I like to encourage, as you know, I teach and I speak to young people a lot, and I do a lot of mentoring. We do interns. We do 5 or 10 internships a year. And for young people that want to go into the real estate business, I really encourage that because I think it is a great way to build wealth, long-term wealth. And so I would suggest that you either get your real estate sales license, go to work for a development company, go to school and get a degree in it if you're young and still in school and want to go down that track. Rutgers just opened up a master's degree program in real estate development. And so you can now get an MRE, Master in Real Estate Development. But buy a house and fix it up and rent it and go on and do the next one. And by the way, if you live in your own house and fix it up and then sell it, or you pay no taxes as long as you buy another primary residence. There's a primary residence tax exemption. So if you do one of them every 1 or 2 years, every dollar you make on each house as you fix it, live in it while you're fixing it, and then sell it, and then buy the next one, you're building wealth tax-free. When you're at a point where you've got enough money, then switch to rental housing and always build. Once you've got enough capital, you need to sell things and turn things over to build capital, but once you've built up a capital base, then start to buy rental properties, because that is the best way to build long-term wealth, is to hold rental properties. And that's what I try to tell people.
That's great. So with our abandoned property program, we got to get some of your graduates to start investing.
I was looking in your newsletter when I was waiting for you this morning, and you've got some homes that you've put on the market. People have fixed them up. Yep. That's perfect.
That's exactly it.
Perfect for starting out.
Well, George, we've run out of time. I knew I could talk to you for an hour.
We'll have to do it again.
Thank you so much for being here today.
It was my pleasure.
And thank you for watching Greenable Woodbridge and being part of the excitement and part of the change.